Gaza War Day 300. Hey, John.
Hey, Justin, thank you for having me on your program.
Thanks for coming. We seem to have made it to day 300 to the 11th month. When we started, remember, we didn't think we were gonna be here that by now, but now I don't, I don't imagine I think we're gonna be here like
This is forever.
for decades. Yeah, we're just gonna be, uh, you know, we're just gonna be here reporting this war.
Yeah.
Um, We have stuff to do today. Let's start though with the fighting. We always start with the fighting. So Gaza fighting, tons of fighting. Do you want to talk about the
Yeah,
fighting?
Gaza fighting. We saw in Rafa the
Hmm.
HJ-8 anti-tank guided missile, the Red Arrow, the Chinese anti-tank guided missile that we saw back in June blow up a Namur engineering vehicle, and they did it again a couple days ago. I actually reported it on the show on Wednesday as a field report and said that'd be interesting to keep our eyes peeled for. And then, sure enough,
Did
that
you say
video came
Wednesday
out.
as if it wasn't yesterday? Because
Oh yeah, because I don't know any
that
days.
that was yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
every day is the longest. Every day is the longest day.
That was that was that was not, I guess that was more than 24 hours ago,
Yeah,
but it
but not
was
enough to forget what day it is. It's just incredible. We have world-changing events, it seems like, that
every
happen every
day.
6 hours, yeah, around the clock. Um,
The
so yeah, that
other
Rafa operation's really interesting.
Tel El, tons of fighting in Tel El.
Tell how is still fighting really hard. Islamic Jihad video from there where they fire a tandem 85 through the pillars of a apartment
Wow.
building, which is actually where I lived in Gaza City. I lived in Tel Hawa. I lived in those buildings, and I felt like they were using those buildings to a T. But those buildings have been dropped, like entire neighborhoods, like for real, entire neighborhoods in Tel Hawa are just gone. And you can't
Yeah.
even really know where you are. You can't really understand your location because all the landmarks are gone. But yeah, they go in, and as soon as the Israelis go into Tel Hawa, they get hammered. As soon as they went into Khan Yunis, nobody was expecting a Khan Yunis invasion. They go into Khan Yunis, and the guys in Khan Yunis were expecting it, and they meet them right away. They don't take a few days to calibrate.
Hmm.
It's really remarkable. And Rafa has been
Yeah.
carrying out all different types of operations. So in that video today, the commander begins by by listing all, he says like, you're
Mhm.
coming for the four battalions, the like
Yeah.
infamous four battalions in Rafa. And he's like, do you remember this? Do you remember this? And just showing each type of qualitative operation, different operations, not like they're just all the best at booby traps, which they are,
Yeah.
but also, just every type of operation. They gave a message to Hezbollah the other day
Yeah.
about the tanks in Rafa. And that video only had footage of tanks from Rafa getting blown up. Like they
Right.
didn't show other battlefront tanks blowing up as like illustrative purposes. They just used the last 2.5 months of Rafa operations. And it's just, yeah, it's incredible. I didn't think the war would go on this long. I didn't think Israel could fight this long. And it's just remarkable that the Palestinian resistance, I just can't believe the patience that it must have taken to not have this battle into 2022 or 2021, or
Hmm.
like how did they know in 2019 that they weren't ready for this battle? And just to be able to prepare for 300 days of battle, 280
Yeah.
days of ground war, it's just remarkable. And just to think
Netzarim.
about those,
Oh,
yeah, Netzarim, they're still all over Netzarim.
constant bombardment of Netzarim.
Constant bombardment. And same with the Philadelphia corridor, which is the other corridor that they're trying to hold. Like that anti-tank guided missile strike was on the edge of the Philadelphia corridor. They're attempting to set up in the Philadelphia corridor, and they get hit by these like pretty impressive operations. So yeah, it's just the fighters are ready for 300 plus days of war. And They don't sit it out, like the battle in Rafa as a military, like you could understand once everyone had left Rafa because they cleared Rafa out, that the fighters, if there wasn't enough of them or if they were in rough shape, that they could melt away and fight with the Khan Yunis brigade instead. But they're not. Each individual location, each camp and town and city is fighting as if that's the only battle, which is just the proof that they're still a fully functioning military force, because they're not doing things like joining up with other battalions. They're still fighting in their formations. And I'm not
Well,
trying to be like surprised by that.
it's
It's just
inherently
impressive.
surprising. It may not be surprising for
Well, we've never seen
some.
anything like this
Yeah,
before. There's not even like nothing even close. There's no war like this. Like the
no,
July War was like 2 or 3 weeks really of ground war in the
yeah.
2006 war. The 2014 war was like very, very limited ground war. It stretched out with a number of ceasefires, and it was only 53 days, and that was the longest. And then when you go back before that, you have wars like 1982 or whatever that didn't have fully formed military formations that were able to confront the,
Yeah.
the Israelis. So we're really seeing something that we've never seen before, which I mean is something that we said on these sit reps probably in day 50, that we'd never seen anything like this before. But just week after week, I always, and because of the Wednesday shows, I have such a keen awareness of like, did they release videos on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Are there going to be no videos this week? And it just never, I don't even get done the show and there's videos out. I spent the entire day on videos today because they're just so remarkable. The operations have so much detail. Yeah, it's impressive. And it's
The Red
just,
Arrow, there's something to ask you about with the Red Arrow missiles, which is you talked many times about the philosophy, I believe, of Adnan Al-Ghul of the simpler weapon that more people can have is better than the complicated weapon that needs more training and isn't portable, etc. Now, this anti-tank guided missile is less portable. It does take more training, and we're
yeah.
seeing more of it we're seeing more of it now than at the beginning, which you would think they would use it up and then move on
Well,
to.
that's the other thing, right? Like what they didn't move that system to Jabalia when the battle was in Jabalia, or to Khan Yunis when the battle was in Khan Yunis. So it seems like they have one of those systems that they smuggled in, which would have been a considerable smuggle. And the question is, how many warheads do they have for that? Because anyways, they're apparently 2 for 2 with them because both of the
You're
vehicles
saying
ended
you
up in
think it's the
flames.
same missile launcher in
Oh,
both
it's
video.
literally the same system.
I didn't
It's
know that.
yeah, almost certain. Yeah. And so it's not
Interesting.
that they don't want systems like that. It's just
Sure.
that they obviously made a strategic decision. They haven't said this, but they obviously made a strategic decision to um yeah, to just make more, to perfect what they could control.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because after the 2006 war in South Lebanon, there would have been a lot of pressure to say we want these Cornet
The same
anti-tank
systems you're
systems.
saying.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
want the same systems that Hezbollah used to
That are
win the
proven
war.
that
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. And there must have been a real temptation to do that.
Mhm.
But they thought past that, and the terrain, like the terrain is so different in South Lebanon. You can set up those systems in the bush, in the mountains, in the rocks, in a way that you can't do in the urban
Yeah.
areas. But today's shot, if you watch the video on my Twitter, the shot today is from a high building with a clear line of sight. So the system worked perfectly. It appears that they're using Cornet tripod. So it's not actually the tripod from the HJ8, which is like a system that's built for you to lie down like
Hmm.
behind a sandbag and shoot over a
I don't know.
sandbag.
Maybe I'm mixing videos up, but it was a guy in a tank top, right? and he was standing beside it when the missile actually launched. He wasn't behind it. He wasn't aiming because it's a guided missile, right?
He's aiming off to the side. He's got the eyes off to the side of it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But so that they put it on a Cornet launcher to get it up higher, and then you can fire it out of the building, like out
And is
windows.
it are they remote? Because it maneuvered. The You could see it maneuvering in the
Yeah,
video.
they apparently have like pretty up to date computer systems,
Okay.
like tracking systems on those. But you could hear him in the video. The spotters like up, 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 up a bit, up.
Right.
Because when you want the thing about those anti-tank guided missiles is they don't go very far. So you
Mhm.
have to treat them ballistically at some point. So they need to
Right.
be up higher so
So
that
they
when
come
they,
down on it.
yeah, so the wire runs out and then it glows down on the target. So yeah, just remarkable. Just the capacity to be able to use that. I assume it was the same shooter. I didn't go back and look.
So these
Uh,
guys are running around Rafa with a big weapon system killing NEM or APCs.
yeah,
That's a, that's a
two
crazy story. That's,
two
I
for
mean,
two, and then taking it down and getting away with it.
yeah.
And then as the organization, just it's just so remarkable to think about how many days they fought in Jabalia, how many days they fought in Gaza City, their most important spots, and never said, let like bring the red arrow up, carry it up. They
Yep.
waited to use it in Rafa because it's the Rafa brigade that because the first video they showed with it, they're holding an anti-tank manual, and the anti-tank manual says Rafa brigade. It doesn't say Qassam brigades. It said Rafa brigade on the manual. So they have manuals for each anti-tank unit in each brigade and each battalion. It's remarkable. And definitely nobody thought this. There's no military analyst that thought that this was going to be 300-day war. Definitely no Israeli thought that. I mean, at some point they might have
Yeah, they're still thinking it's
when they
1967 and 5 more days is going to do it.
yeah.
West Bank, Tulkarm, there's an operation they reported shooting operation on a settlement. So what's a shooting operation on a settlement when they bombard the settlement with a barrage of blessed bullets? This is usually the language that I read.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Like spray
Okay.
and pray.
So they just spray and pray. Right.
Yeah, they fire on settler vehicles sometimes. They're usually pretty selective. They don't just fire randomly for the most part on settlers, although some do. But there was an operation last week where they
Mhm.
get patrols, right? Like the settlement security patrol or the IDF patrol, and they fire on them.
Right.
And yeah, I had those numbers. So yeah, there's been 1,533 of those since October 7th.
Right.
But that's what the second intifada, that's like one of the reasons why they built this separation wall, was because they would take the high ground in a place like Bethlehem and
Mhm.
fire in on the down lower into the roads that went in the valleys and whatnot. So
And you'd just be living your happy settler life, and then all of a sudden there's a hail of bullets.
yeah, yeah,
Nablus, there's fighting. They said they're confronting an Israeli raid. Jenin, they're confronting an Israeli raid as we record this. So these 1 day, day and a half raids of every town in the West Bank, more or less daily.
yeah. And they don't stay and fight. Like they're not staying and fighting battles. Like they're not setting up in a house and defending it and fighting. They're kind of just driving in. You see the same footage kind of all the time. They drive the bulldozer and destroy everybody's cars.
Yes.
Um, but they don't appear to be arrest raids. Like they don't appear to be hunting for individual people. They appear to be just going in and smashing and grabbing. Because
Yeah.
last night in the West Bank, they arrested 25 Islamic Jihad fighters. So they do that in the middle of the night. They come in, they
Mhm.
swoop in. Um, they're Mr. Avim units dressed as in some way they sneak in and are able to capture people. So that's separate from what we're seeing in Jenin and Tulkarm, where they're just smashing.
Speaking of smashing, there's new massacres at school, a school in Shujaiya, a house in Gaza City, another house in Khan Yunis, and there's another airstrike in Lebanon, in Shama, killing five, they said maybe Syrian refugees. I don't know. It's in Lebanon. So,
I wrote down somewhere the numbers because the civil defense um, released their day 300 numbers.
mm,
I don't know if people just gloss over at these numbers, but they're appalling. 50,000 dead and missing, 40,000 people dead have reached the hospital. So that's like a confirmed number. 16,000 kids, 9,000 natural deaths, which is 6 times the number in this period normally. So they're at 6 times the natural deaths. I mean, I don't know what the proper medical term for that is. What's it called? Like excess
that's yeah.
mortalities, whatever, something like that. But just 34 hospitals non-functional, just like 7 mass graves in hospitals. Like, what even are we reading? 5,000 prisoners in that Sede Taman prison, 35 tortured to death, 500 schools and universities either destroyed completely or severely damaged. His numbers are they're just unbelievable. They're almost unbelievable. I mean, the only reason they're believable to us is because we've been immersed in this horror for 10 months. I just feel like if you came up on this without knowing, like those numbers that I just said in the like 90 seconds of the sit rep, that's the genocide. You don't even need all of the other.
Yeah, you can skip hours and hours of sit reps. Just hear that. Here, I heard a story. I met a professor from Al-Azhar University, and they're still trying to teach remotely. And so he was doing exam review for a student who was injured in one of these camps outside of a hospital. And the camp, this is just the most Palestinian story ever. The camp is surrounded, the Israelis are invading the camp. And the student is like, Professor, on page 20 of the textbook, there's a certain ambiguity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the professor was just like, the professor was in Egypt or whatever, the professor was like, please don't worry about
Page 20. Yeah, I mean, these are the stories that because there's a blackout on information, we don't see these kind of things, but they're happening all over. The kids are in school in tents.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the drama club is meeting in tents and like this stuff. And that happened during the second intifada when I was living in Jenin. I used to walk the kids to school and Rafa too. That's one of the things that the ISM did in those days was walk kids to school. And so when I went as a reporter, I would walk with them to school in Rafa.
Yeah.
And yeah, that they were going, the school would be canceled because there would be a curfew and they would go to a school that was in the back room of somebody's house in an alley. You go down the back alley, turn right, and open the door, and all of a sudden you're in a classroom of 7-year-olds. Like,
There's a very strict teacher at the front of the room,
yeah, teaching them
who's
all, and just even like to talk about Haniyeh, right? Like Haniyeh is a product of that. He went to UN schools all growing up. He went to the Islamic University. It's just his story is the story of Palestinians. Like he's driven out of Majd al-Ashkelon. Um, you know, his his family members were killed in that battle, and then he ends up in the Gaza Strip, goes to school all through Gaza. Like they're educating in the most unbelievable circumstances. And now they have 500 schools that have to be replaced for a generation and a half of kids. It's
um
that's just the everyday courage. That's the everyday courage. Like I always cover the resistance, and it's awesome to do that. but like just the everyday courage of people to
Yeah.
continue to resist, to continue to go out and find food and water, and you just
I remember that
juxtapose that
doctor.
with the cowardliness of the Israelis, right? Like
Yeah.
killing a guy in his bedroom in Tehran or whatever, thinking that
Yeah.
that's like some
Something to
daring,
celebrate.
yeah, that's some daring mission. You killed a politician who's never touched a gun in his life,
Who's always lived out in the open, always announced where he goes. He's a
including then,
diplomat. Yeah.
including that day when Haniyeh was killed. Everybody knew he was at the inauguration,
Yeah.
and everyone knew that he went from Beijing to the inauguration. It's not some, but yeah,
Intelligence feeds.
there's an intelligence failure
Yeah. There
somewhere.
is a
I don't know
security.
why Qassam, like,
There's
why is he doing that? Why is he able? Is that able to happen? Why is he staying in the same place multiple
why isn't
times
it so?
constantly? Why
Yeah,
wasn't it
well, let's get to
swept?
that. Let me
Okay.
we have a transition. We have a fairly natural transition
Okay.
from Sayyid Abdelmalik Badruddin Houthi's speech, because he talks about the assassinations. He talks about how killing Yassin and Rantizi and all of these figures does not change anything. It doesn't weaken the resistance. The resistance gets stronger. The wars make the resistance stronger. He chastises the Arab regimes for worrying more about the scratch on Trump's ear than the leaders of the Ummah. He calls them the leaders, the murder of the leaders of the Ummah. Um, he tells people explicitly don't rely on international institutions. Nothing will come of them. So that's an interesting form of realism uh, from that part of the axis. I mean, it's interesting, especially because I think Iran and Lebanon both have gone to the United Nations. Iran basically went to the United Nations and said, "We're going to do something back." So there they are. They were trying to proceed according
Right,
to
right, right,
international law,
right.
and Al
I remember
Houthis
that.
like, "Don't bother." So
Right.
um,
That's interesting.
he said, "This is the time for action."
Is
And he
that his
also
first speech since they've been bombed? Did he speak after Hodeidah was bombed?
he did speak after Hodeidah was bombed,
Okay.
and he said the response is coming, but they haven't responded to date. It hasn't happened. So
No,
he said it's inevitable and it's coming, but I guess now it'll be part of a bigger package. Um, he
maybe.
also he said this is the time for action, and then he also recalled like Ismail Haniyeh. One of the last things that Ismail Haniyeh did in Iran was call for a day of action on August 3rd for the prisoners. So Al Houthi kind of reiterated that. He said, "Let's make August 3rd a big day for
Oh, I
them."
missed that. Okay.
And he made his usual call for the Friday. I think Al Houthi probably speaks almost every Thursday. I think it's a weekly address before the Friday to kind of call people to the Million Man March on Friday.
Right.
Because he said when he said today when he said let's have a huge turnout tomorrow, I was like he always says that. I remember that he always says it's really important that we have a huge turnout tomorrow. So yeah, Haniyeh, we think so. Apparently, we think now that because initially we were talking about a missile from Kurdistan or Azerbaijan or something, but now they're saying it was a bomb that was planted 2 months ago in the guest house that he stays at. So he stays at the same guest house. But like, how do you? It doesn't. None of this makes sense. Like a missile didn't make sense either.
No, nobody reported hearing a missile, which you would
Yeah,
hear. But then I saw today, did you see the like satellite imagery of the actual guest
yeah,
house? It's
yeah,
like nestled right into the mountains. There's mountains on three sides of
yeah.
it.
There it is. Yeah.
Um,
And
I
there's
don't know if you
damage
want to
on
throw
one
that up.
little, basically the room. If it was an apartment, it looks like an apartment building. It doesn't look like a single unit,
Yeah.
and it
It's
looks
a
like just
guest, like they're saying it's a guest house. I think they were saying that it's like an IRGC veterans, um, whatever that means. I don't know if, but that was the thing, is that if it was an IRGC guest house, what happened?
how do you know how did it not get swept for bombs?
But then
Uh,
Ziad Nakale, the leader of Islamic Jihad, was
yeah.
apparently either in the next room or the floor above, and
And he's survived.
they didn't seem like they were targeting him.
But so like, I mean, if it was a planted bomb, they would have had to presumably plant
I guess in
another
two
bomb.
rooms.
And like, it's one thing to say he stays in that house. Does he stay in the same room every time?
I know that. I mean, that's the thing. And would you put the bomb in the room that he stayed, or would you put it in the like common area
In
where
the
everyone
lobby?
would be? There's just the levels of it are, yeah, they're hard to,
Yeah, I hope they can reverse engineer the whole thing. And
yeah, they're gonna have to give a pretty good story because I think the Iranians were definitely, that was a slap in the face for sure.
yeah, I mean, I was thinking, I didn't, I don't, I never, I hadn't decided whether I was gonna say this out loud, but it's like, as an answer to, as a slap in the face in terms of an answer to like Hezbollah's videos of the Hudhud, where they're showing all the targets, and meanwhile Israel's like, you can show the targets, but we're actually killing your leaders in your own cities. We're
Yeah.
killing Haniyeh in Tehran, we're killing Fouad al-Shukr in
Yeah. So the IDF
Shahia.
today said that they didn't fire a missile at Iran. So they came out
They're
like
trying
on the
to
record.
letter of the law.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. There's definitely more to be known about that. But that's another thing is that the IRGC didn't really come out with a full
Yeah,
explanation.
we still haven't, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't know. I mean, yeah, or they don't know, or I just feel like it has this feeling, like I've had this feeling with when Raisi died too. I have this feeling like, you know, like there's some really good intelligence assets that Mossad or the West or CIA has in Iran, where they're able to they're able to do these kinds of things.
But is that, I don't know if that's true because like even the most recent nuclear scientists that they killed, they were using like remotely detonated. One was like a remotely operated machine gun.
Mm,
Because the idea was that it's difficult to get the
human.
physical
Yeah.
people out of, and if the Israelis actually did plant that bomb, then the Israelis would want to say we did it 2 weeks ago so that the country didn't shut down looking for the five
Mm.
Mossad agents that carried out the
Yeah, two
operation,
months
right?
ago. Yeah, yeah.
So saying that, that's what they said, it was planted 2 months ago. And
But
it
who
was,
said that though? Who said that? Was that from Israel?
yeah,
No.
from Ronan Bergman, Mossad.
Oh,
Yeah.
that could be total BS though.
Yeah. And then the only other confirmation is what's his name? Ravid Barak, the
Oh
guy
yeah.
yeah, that gets everything from the State Department.
This is like Seymour Hersh at this point. It's like this is not what they know. This is what they want you to
Yeah,
believe.
but then he whoever says these are the sources, and then he phones the sources and says, I can independently confirm.
Oh, sure.
That's not how independent confirmation works.
That's not what the words mean, my friends.
So it's tough. I don't know. And there's parts about it that they're saying like there's some talk that Haniyeh's bodyguard was like a Nukba
Yeah,
commander,
an elite Qassam guy.
but Qassam hasn't said that.
Oh.
Um, and so
And they
yeah,
they would have probably commemorated him separately, no?
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question because they said that he was part of the 24. The reporting is that he was part of the 24 2014 Nahal
Yeah, I
Oz
saw that.
cross-border
Yeah.
raid. But they also said that it was the first raid behind enemy lines, which is like
Which was
nobody in Gaza
2012
would
or
2006, like Gilad
yeah,
Shalit was behind
right,
enemy
of
lines
course.
on a tunnel operation. Like I don't think anyone in Gaza would screw that up.
Right.
It wasn't in the Al Jazeera story. It was in the Turkish newspaper. So I
Mm.
don't know. It's just because even just saying who he was is that's giving a lot of intelligence information
Right.
because you can reverse engineer
Yeah.
like blank spots in the puzzle that
Yeah.
Israel is trying to put together. So like I
And
don't
who, yeah. Although on the other hand, it would stand to reason that Haniyeh's bodyguard would be somebody pretty
it totally
important in
would.
their
It
order.
makes perfect sense on that front too. And before that, he was Siad Siam's bodyguard, and he was the interior minister in Gaza, Qassam commander. And then yeah, but then how does he go from a Nukba commander to leaving the country and traveling on a passport?
Right.
That's a huge security uh, lapse by Israel too, obviously. So I don't know. There's just a lot. There's a pile of information. I spent a lot of the day on this stuff, just
Yeah.
trying to be right, trying to not be wrong at least. And
Yeah, well, with Brett Bergman publishing a story on it is, that's gonna make it almost impossible to figure out what really happened at that point.
yeah, but I mean the missile, the nobody saying they heard a missile, like a missile,
Mhm.
especially if it's launched from,
Yeah.
you're gonna hear it. You're gonna
Yeah,
hear it.
it
They
wouldn't have
make a
been
lot of
I was
noise.
yeah. I was just like, what, a drone from inside the city, a missile from Kurdistan. But yeah,
I mean, no,
that's
they
like a
can fire.
long
There's long distance. They have long
sure.
distance capacity. They have those spice kits that the Americans gave them that are like glide bombs, which
Yeah,
basically put wings and
right.
engines
Like the
on.
Russian fabs we've been hearing
Yeah,
about in Ukraine.
The Russians have been using them. And so they have the capacity to do that, and to sneak one of those through air defenses isn't that it's not
Right.
that
It's
huge a leap.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, on a day like that in the capital, oof,
No, and it would have been a bunch of fighters. They would have sent an escort with
yeah,
those jets. So it's like there would have been a signature of them
yeah,
flying. Like when they went to Hodeidah,
yeah,
it was a
yeah.
signature of them flying that operation, although they carried out a number of strikes there compared to this one.
Did you see? Do you know who Dmitry Medvedev is? He was
No.
president of
Oh
Russia.
yeah. Prime
Like,
Minister, right? He switched with was he the
yeah,
guy who
he was kind
flopped
of
back
he
and forth?
did a little bit of the musical chairs with Putin, but he's like way more. He's like the bad cop. He's like the ultimate Russian bad cop in politics. So he's the one who, like, when Putin's being diplomatic, he's being over the top. So his over the top thing that he said today was, it seems like the only way to reach peace in the Middle East is through a full scale war. That's what he said today.
Wow. Because the Russians are all over the Golan, right?
What?
So yeah, they're all on the edge of the Golan.
On
That's
the
the
Syrian side.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
They're presumably operating air defense. They're probably training the Syrians on their S-400s or whatever they have.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure what the Russians are doing still, but yeah, those are strategic positions that they took up
Yeah.
that they wanted to have a foothold in. So if Russia's talking about a
It's a
war,
weird thing. I mean, he's not the guy who says Russia's official position, but he is kind of the guy who says
who
the
floats the trial
crazy stuff
balloons?
to see. Yeah. But that was one of the weirdest. I've never heard a Russian talk like that in 10 months. Like, even Medvedev about the Middle East. He says stuff like that about Ukraine and Zelensky and everything all the time, but they've been very cautious, very minimalist in the Middle East. They're always peace, two-state solution, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, the Israelis said today that Mohammed al-Deif, they've confirmed, intelligence confirmed
And just
that
how
he
did
was
they
killed. I don't know
confirm?
what
How did they
there's
do
no
this?
new information.
Confirm? Did
There's
they
no
produce his body somewhere?
no. But Qassam is not acknowledging that either. And they didn't acknowledge Marwan Issa, who the Israelis say
Hmm.
they killed. And at some point, it's been too long. Like Kassam's not going to say, it seems weird that they would say, like, 6 or 9 months later, oh, by the way, our top commander was killed and we didn't say anything. So it
Well,
seems like at some point you get far enough away from the accusation that they just going to not tell? The Israelis will never know.
the Israelis will never know.
And
That's
so
what
if
I said the
Qassam
first
never
time.
says yes or no,
There's absolutely no way. Like we said last time, Mohammed Daif could walk right by them in in
yeah,
Jerusalem.
well, they didn't think he was walking right by them, right?
Yeah,
Like when we started sit repping, they didn't
yeah,
think he could walk.
yeah. So, but I mean, they did say something. They said somebody said Mohammed Daif is watching your stupid speech, right? That
So
somebody
right
addressed that
away
to
they
the
said that
yeah.
right away, yeah.
But I mean,
But
that
so
could
the Israelis, they
possibly.
they had been saying, other people had been saying, the IDF had been, the people who speak for the IDF, they're journalists, they had been saying that it was Dave. But today was the first day that the IDF said we have confirmation. But are they just piling on
Yeah,
their
that just
perceived
it's like
victories?
it's a nice kind of symmetry, right? Like we got Haniyeh, we got Daif, we got Fouad, Shokor.
Yeah.
We got somebody in Gaza, we got somebody in Beirut, we got somebody in Tehran. Like it would be a nice
And
kind
the
of
Gaza one seems the least likely.
because they're saying they killed him in a tent massacre. So he was
Yeah,
in
well,
a
they showed
tent.
the aerial footage of it today. They hadn't showed us full on drone footage. They showed us color drone footage today.
Okay.
And it's like just six huge, probably 2,000 pounders, just like all right after another. I think they said they had 3 planes circling, like waiting to strike, and then they fired them all at once. And you could definitely see how you could kill and wound
A person.
hundreds of people. Yeah.
Sure, sure. But
And you could just see all
confirmed?
the tents all around, right? Like just their way of addressing the world, interacting with the world is just so messed up that you could just look from this drone and they're looking at the same footage that we're seeing.
Yep.
They showed us today, and it's like, look at all the tents. You're like, holy, look at all the tents. And
Yeah.
then they're like, no, we're gonna hit right
And
in this
yeah,
spot
they don't
where
get it
people are living with fabric around them
that we told them to go to
that we
because
told,
it was a
like
safe zone.
literally told them to go to. And people are in tents exactly where they told them to go. They're not one
Yeah.
block past where they said block 2,963 or whatever ridiculous numbers, right? Like they're 4-digit numbers. It's just criminal. That's just criminal. The stuff where you assassinate military commanders who are who live clandestine lives,
Right.
that's one thing. But when you're just firing into a tent camp
Yeah.
of people, or yeah, well, we haven't even
Nasrallah?
got to Abu Hadi yet.
Nasrallah gave a speech today at the ceremony for Ismail Haniyeh. Um, I don't know. One of the things he said, and we've known this, but it was interesting to hear him say it, where he was talking about how the leaders die at the same rate as the fighters. Like the leaders,
Yeah, like they lead from the front.
they lead from the front. And so that was like that was a point that I appreciated him saying, like
Yeah, you want to
that
just go in
is
order?
yeah.
I listened to it all. It was Ali Risk did the live translation on Press TV.
He had a flu or something. His nose was blocked when he
He
was doing
admitted
his
it. He admitted
translation.
it. Abu Hadi admitted it. He said he
No, I
had a.
mean, I mean, I mean,
Oh,
Ali
you mean Ali
Risks.
Risk? Yeah,
Yeah, they both did.
they both did. Yeah, and so like he started right off by, I just thought it was interesting. Like it just starts right off by saying that they're partners, right? It's like
Yeah,
Qassam. partners. There are partners in pain, in anger, in battle,
Yeah.
in victory, in accountability, right? In
Yeah.
accountability is an interesting, and in pride, but in accountability, to your movement, to each other. Uh, yeah, it's just, that's not just a throwaway line,
No.
you never. But yeah, so he said right, pretty much right off the top, he started counting on his fingers all the reasons why there's going to be a response to this one.
Yeah.
It was in the Dahia. It was not a military target.
Yeah.
There was civilian casualties, and they killed the top commander, and he sort of counted them off on his fingers. And yeah, and I was looking forward to the Haj Mohsen
Bio.
biography, because that's the thing about Hezbollah, is you only ever learn about these guys when they die, because there's such a quality operational security organization that even the fighters in Hezbollah don't know them.
Well,
And so,
the pictures they've released of him still have his companions blurred out. So it's now a picture of Fouad al-Shokor with two or three people with their faces blurred beside him, and we'll
yeah, and when
recognize those faces.
Imad Magnia was assassinated, there was all these stories for months and months after of people saying like, oh, he would show up at a meeting
Yeah.
and we didn't know who he was. Or people would say, I thought his name was like, people like high up in the organization. It's remarkable. It's like something that you can't, that's just built into their organization right from the beginning. And it, you can see why they're successful.
He was a founding member of Hezbollah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nasrallah says that he's going to tell us later.
Yeah, he's like, I wish I could tell you more now, but I can't.
He's not
Yeah.
going to tell us now, but basically, yeah, the long and short of it is they showed pictures of him with Imad Mugnia, with Mustafa Badruddin, who are the two top commanders, like the actual leaders of the Islamic resistance. And he said that the super interesting thing was that he said that Haj Mohsen was the trainer of the martyrdom operations. So
Right.
it was his guys that carried out the martyrdom missions, which were the suicide bombings that were basically like the game changer that Hezbollah brought to the world, was to not just pack a car with explosives and leave, but to
Yeah.
drive that car of
Right.
explosives. And they blew up, like famously blew up the Israeli base in Tyre in South Lebanon, in Sur. And that first operation was just like a remarkable operation that just changed the way warfare was fought. And then he said he was part of that. So he was saying like he's part of Islamic Jihad, the pre-Hezbollah group that carried out all of these like really remarkable operations, like wiping out the Marine Corps barracks
Yeah.
in Beirut and killing 250 people, 250 soldiers, blowing up the CIA station, which killed everyone in the Middle East bureau of the CIA, which basically like forced the CIA to basically start from scratch. And then they captured the next CIA leader who was sent there. Buckley, I think Buckley was his name. And they got him. So they're just like qualitative operations that the world had never seen before. And then within a few years of that, then they're not carrying out martyrdom missions anymore.
Right.
So it's like they said
That's the evolution.
yeah, he fosters this thing, which basically means it was his idea to come up with these type of operations. And then when you see how successful, just like on a military scale, how successful those operations were, the Marines left Beirut after that operation. They were like,
Yeah.
I'm not playing this. And so that was super interesting detail. The other interesting thing was he just said like, even if we make a mistake about Majid al-Shams, like he would say, if it was our mistake,
would have admitted it.
we would admit our mistake,
Yeah.
right? Like we would admit if we meant to do it, we would admit if it was a mistake. And he said that they waited a number of hours
Yeah.
to respond to that. And
he praised the Druze leaders for not playing Israel's game. He never said the word the Druze leaders. He always said the honorable Druze.
Yeah, he never said Druze without saying honorable.
Yeah, he said
in every time he said it.
Druze leaders for,
which is true, right? Like they chased Netanyahu out, they chased Smotrich out.
Absolutely.
Halevi went and sat with like one of the religious whatever, over in some like secluded area, not where the politicians went. And that was the only way that he wasn't chased out.
Yeah.
So
the when he talked about the response from Iran to the assassination of Haniyeh, he emphasized that the Ayatollah said it was a matter of honor, not just sovereignty or privileges or rights, but honor. And he said, listen to that, listen to his tone, listen to the words. He said it was a matter of honor. Ismail Haniyeh was their guest.
Yeah, so that's the key, right?
Yeah.
That you don't do that to a guest, and it's their responsibility, their accountability to look after and to be. And yeah, I think he also say that he was like angrier. He said he was like angrier than he was with Qasem Soleimani, and like just sort of said these other examples
and
of times.
They put a red flag up, I guess, in Tehran, which they've only previously done for Qasem Soleimani,
right?
He was assassinated because it means revenge. He also said they paused. He said when they first assassinated Fouad al-Shokor, he ordered a pause in operations on the border, and he said we're going to resume operations in the morning, and I don't want anybody to get it twisted. Those operations are not the response to the assassination of Fouad Shokor. That response is going to be something else entirely.
Yeah, and he said there wouldn't be stages of it. So he didn't say like it would be a process. He was saying like you'll know.
You'll know. You'll know. He said, yeah, you're going to hear we've hit this or that. That's not going to be.
That's not it. Yeah.
That's not it. There's a newspaper called Al-Akhbar. It's a Lebanese newspaper that was started after the 2006 war. And it's sort of a resistance oriented newspaper.
Yeah, it's like a left resistance.
And they had an article about Fouad Shokor today, and it's got a pretty good quote. It says Fawad read Israel like an open book, and he could enumerate in a single session all the major population centers, industrial, commercial, and agricultural areas within the entity, in addition to the nature of the settler populations in each region, their origins, customs, and livelihoods. In the same session, he was also capable of dissecting the entire vast Israeli military system, categorizing it into layers and levels, and identifying its strengths and weaknesses. He would point out the most important bases, sites, and military airports within the entity, and would confidently, seriously, and sharply affirm that the resistance possesses the full capability to strike all these targets only when His Eminence Sayyid Nasrallah gives the order. So
yeah, he was a legitimate commander. He was the commander of the Islamic resistance, it appears.
Yeah,
he was the top commander, like chief of staff. Because they were saying, like Israel said that he's in charge of the Golan. That's what they said, but it sounds like a lot more than that.
Probably overall.
But yeah, so Nasrallah also, so he said that he cited the Hodeidah attack. So he said the three things have happened that haven't been responded to: the Israel bombing Yemen, and then the Haniyeh, and then the Hajj
And there
Mosin.
was also some fairly significant bombings of the Iraqi resistance too, by the Americans directly.
But he said those things, those three things have changed the
Yes.
conflict.
And the change is a new phase.
New
And the new
phase.
phase, he says, is we're no longer support fronts. We are now directly at war with Israel. So that's more or less what Malik Houthi said last week. He said, and the Houthis said that in their demonstration. They said, now you've struck us. Now we're not fighting you in support of Gaza. We're fighting you because we're at war with you directly. And
Yeah.
I guess the same goes for Lebanon, and I guess the same goes for Iran. Now, he did kind of have that you can still stop this if you stop the aggression on Gaza. But like,
Yeah, and he also said that he did that. The only thing between us are the days and nights in the battlefield,
what does that mean?
which just means that it's gonna come sometime,
Right.
but it's not. It's like it's one of
It's
his
on our
patient. It's one
you're
of
on
his
our
patients.
you're on our schedule, not
Yeah,
we're not on your schedule, basically.
yeah,
Um, the probably the quote I'm gonna use for the thumbnail. He said, laugh today. You
yeah.
can have your laugh today.
Laugh now, weep later.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how I wrote it down.
Um, yeah, like yeah, you probably didn't watch my sit rep yesterday, but I called the sit rep like today was Israel's day.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so he does. So Nasrallah did all that. I'm in the same place as you are, and then he stops. He says, like, I'm not going to reveal everything about
Fouad.
Haj Mohsen. He basically said that he took over after the assassinations of Badruddin and Mughniya. So he's saying that Badruddin took over after Mughniya. Um, and he says Haj Mohsen took over after Badruddin was assassinated, and that the three of them were there from the beginning. They were the first commanders from the beginning. And so he says he stops. He says, I'm not going to do all of that history. And he stops and he says, "What now?" Right? Like
Yeah.
he stops and he says, "So what now?" Right? And gets right into that part of it, that it's a new phase, that yeah, the difference between killing a host or killing someone you're hosting versus being in Damascus, a clear like allusion to the Damascus assassinations that were the red lines, right? These red lines have already been articulated on sit reps.
Yeah.
They said that these things will never happen again. They didn't say they'll happen and we'll
Yeah.
respond on our time. They said they wouldn't happen anymore. Iran's attack was to say that that wouldn't happen anymore, and that was
But
over
that, yeah.
their property in Damascus.
Yeah.
So, and you're saying it's categorically different than
Yeah.
that thing that they responded to and required six allied countries and all their fighter jets and 2 weeks of
Yeah, which is what the Americans are
pre-positioning.
doing now. They're scrambling. They've scrambled their naval assets
Yeah.
to the back of the region. I'm sure the Jordanians and Saudis, but I think they've threatened. I mean, Yemen has threatened the Saudis multiple times now. Iran, I think, just said we'll target anybody who helps this time. So
Yeah, in the IDF press conference, they said that they said our allies are bringing assets to the region, like like I'm going to go get my brother, like basically, you know,
yeah,
I'm going to get my brother to fight your brother or whatever.
I mean, we've got to get into this, in future sit reps because America has assets in the region, but I don't think, what can I say? What they can bring to bear to help Israel is already built into the calculations of the resistance. It's not like the resistance is thinking we're fighting Israel by themselves. That's
No,
never
and their
been
assets are the same assets,
the
right? Like
same
when they,
assets
yeah,
exactly.
the thing that
Yeah.
the Americans did was like they brought their Iron Dome and their Patriots and
Yeah.
their right? And they brought those over on the ships right away. That was their thing. It's the same assets. And it's just such a close. This is the thing about Hezbollah's precision guided missile capability is that it's so close. It's being fired. The distance to
Yes.
Haifa is so close. It's like the Iranian attack took, what was it, 16
9
hours,
hours. Yeah.
9 hours, whatever it was for them to fly. I think the Houthi one was 16 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, 9 hours to fly across the Middle East. That's just not what happens if they were to rain down on Haifa. And Nasrallah has been saying for years, if you attack the Dahia, we're going to attack
Yeah.
Haifa. And then the Salah Aruri assassination kind of was like,
It wasn't a Hezbollah guy. And
yeah. And then Israel kind of said, like, this wasn't a Hezbollah thing. Like,
yeah.
but this is not that. This is the IDF today said that they killed him.
Well, yeah. And I've seen a lot about like how Netanyahu wants to ensnare the Americans in a war in the Middle East. But it's like, again, when the Americans are ensnared, it's just like the Americans being there is not magic. The Americans are men, like you said, they have to put one foot in front of the other. They have to pull the trigger with their index finger.
Yeah.
They have to press the button with, like and all their technology, all the best stuff they have, they've been giving to the Israelis.
Yeah.
They
That's the
don't, they
thing.
don't, they don't
Even what
hold,
they
yeah,
didn't give to the Israelis, they are interoperable with the Israelis with
yeah,
theirs. So like their Overwatch planes, they have signals intelligence planes that are better than the Israelis, but they have been in the service of the Israelis since
exactly.
October the 8th.
And I don't think that, I mean, I don't doubt that elite elite units in the American military are better than elite units in the Israeli military.
Well, we know that now for sure. We know that now. I think, honestly, I think 2 years ago we would have people wouldn't necessarily
Yeah,
have said that. They would have said their
the mystique
peers.
of Israel, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a joke. There's nobody that believes that anymore. But the Americans have the ability to put numbers. If they're talking about defending Israel, then they can put soldiers on the ground, because if there's a war between Hezbollah and Israel, it's more
Gonna take
likely to be
place in
fought
Israel.
in the
Yeah,
Galilee than it is in the hills of Bint Jbeil.
but like the logistics of this troop carrier, this troop transfer, this defense, the defense in depth of the Israeli interior from the invading. I don't know. I mean, we're in a time of crazy stuff happening.
And it can happen
But
quickly. Like if you are
and it
talking
can
about
happen
what the
quickly.
Americans could do, is that they could land in one of those C-130s or C-17 Globemaster cargo
Yeah.
planes, and the back could open up, and hundreds of
Yeah.
Delta Force, Navy SEAL, Green
Yeah.
Beret, Ranger
But
Regiment, like,
those guys die when they get hit by an anti-tank guided missile just like any other
yeah.
person.
And it won't save your country because people
Yeah.
will leave the
Yeah.
country. But then Nasrallah said, I have it written here. He said, everyone knows, everybody knows that we cannot but respond.
Yeah.
And they've
Yeah, and
carried out,
the other thing I just want to say that it just occurred to me, or that I just remembered, is the Iraqi resistance, which is part of the Axis, has been fighting the Americans since 2003 or whatever. I mean, however you want to date it, but like
yeah,
the
the
Americans,
Americans have been to the Middle East to fight wars and lost
yeah,
very recently.
yeah.
I'm old enough to remember.
So
I'm
it
old
just
enough to
like,
remember being right about Iraq.
yeah, let's just not think that the Americans coming, like it's another delusion of Netanyahu's, that and all of the Netanyahu's of the
Yeah.
world,
There's no
of which
indication
there are
that the
many.
Americans are going to put ground troops in to save Israel in the Galilee. That is not that is
Yeah.
not an obvious thing that the Americans are going to
What
do.
they've done historically in decolonizing countries like the Congo 1960 is they bring a bunch of troops to get their people out,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Like they'll bring troops to evacuate their
Exactly.
embassy and their
But
their
there
VIPs.
is records of that. Like Melanie Jolie, the Canadian
Yeah.
foreign minister, she was setting up to
Yeah.
have warships dock to get all of like dual citizens out, and the
Which
Americans had
is
a
a
similar
lot
thing.
of
It's a
people.
lot.
That's a lot of dual citizens.
There's a lot of Israeli double passports that are going to be used, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. The Americans don't come in and save Israel before the catastrophe that
Yeah,
makes a significant
exactly.
portion of their population leave for good. But also, it just cements the fact that nobody's moving back to the border. Nobody's moving into the five
Well,
kilometer range on the border. People aren't going back to Kfar Aza in the Gaza envelope when there's a possibility of fighting in the Galilee. That just changes everything.
so two set reps ago, I talked about an article by Sheer Hever. You guys have had Sheer Hever on twice.
Hmm.
And he was just talking about like the economy of Israel is never going to recover. And there was this thing about like somebody estimated he was quoting some Israeli economist or something who said there's basically 300,000 people who are holding the elite levels of the commanding heights of the Israeli economy, like in terms of tech, education, higher education, etc. And this economist said something like, if these people leave, we're not gonna have an economic crash. We're just not gonna have a country. Like,
Yeah.
and like, why would you stay? Like, why would you you're like a hospital administrator or something. You're
Yeah, with a German passport.
you're a computer scientist, and your government is debating whether it's legitimate or not to rape prisoners. And you're reading, and you pick up the daily newspaper, and it's the wife of the rapist saying, "What do I care about my husband's victim?" Like,
Yeah.
is, is that like that's the life you want to, then you what, finish your coffee and you head over to
Yeah, this is
push
your
paper?
country. I mean, this
What?
is what we've been saying. And you're the computer scientist who, if you get
Yeah.
captured while you're working from home
Yeah.
in the Gaza envelope, they're not even going to bother with you. They're not even going to pretend like they're negotiating. They're actually going to
They're gonna kill you.
assassinate.
They're gonna bomb you to prevent you from becoming a bargaining chip. Yeah,
It's we're watching Israel unravel.
absolutely. Absolutely. I just, but yeah, I mean, look, the is the Americans are not gonna like press a button and save Israel, but I am trying to psychologically prepare myself for an underwhelming resistance response, because I do think that Israel's defenses are pretty robust, and I think that Israel's defenses have been, for the past better part of a year, what's prevented the resistance from stopping the genocide in Gaza. Because like if they could have taken out the airfields, if they could have, taken out the air, the air superiority in a stroke,
Well,
I'm sure they would have.
they think that if they take out an airfield, that Lebanon will be destroyed, and
Yeah, it's not a matter. You can't just take out all the air, like even with 150,000 missiles, you can't. It's not a simple thing to take out all of Israel's airfields and all of Israel's F-35s and 15s and 16s and bombs. Like this is like Russia's been trying to destroy Ukraine's, a country, whatever, proportionally far smaller than Russia, with its entire military industry, and Ukraine still flies planes. Ukraine still flies bombing runs. Ukraine still has drones. Like, that's been going on 2+ years.
yeah,
So this is not like, it's also just, I mentioned this yesterday, like the resistance is really, really um knows their enemy very well, knows their own capacities very well, has built itself up over decades brilliantly, but like they are still massively outgunned. Like they are massively, massively outgunned defensively and offensively.
Yeah, if the goal is ruination, which is I think is about the only thing that the Israelis have shown that they can do is
Yeah,
destroy a country.
yeah.
Like
Kill people,
but
assassinate people.
but Hezbollah will destroy their country back
Yeah,
if they're talking about a total war,
yeah,
both countries are destroyed. Hezbollah is big enough and formidable enough to destroy huge portions
yeah.
of what is
Well,
the Israeli
absolutely.
state.
And the only thing, the other thing, like people, I don't want people to forget is like whenever they say, we're gonna make Lebanon look, we're gonna make Beirut look like Gaza. Like the only reason you can make Gaza look like Gaza is because of Egypt, is because you have a very unique situation where where Gaza has no strategic depth beyond what they've able to literally dig out of the ground. Lebanon is not enclosed on all sides. Lebanon has
No,
Syria. Uh,
absolutely. They have
so
they have Syria. They also have what Hamas has,
yeah,
but concrete
yeah, real.
fortified in rock,
Yeah,
right? Like in rock, not in sand, in rock hillsides. All their fighters, their weaponry, their command centers,
yeah.
all buried, and not an air war won't destroy Hezbollah.
No.
It'll destroy Lebanon, but not Hezbollah.
What I'm saying too is like there's only one place that can be made to look like Gaza, and that's Gaza.
Right.
The circumstances of Gaza are uniquely unfortunate in terms of their ability to protect themselves from Israel.
Yeah, because they're surrounded on all sides by the people that are destroying them.
Yeah. Uh, And yeah. And Egypt shouldn't be playing that game, but they are, for whatever reason. And Egypt is as strong in not helping as
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
their deep state, their state institutions are completely dependent on the money from
Mhm.
the Camp David peace agreements. So their military can't function as a military if it decides to go independent on Gaza. I think you did that on a
Perhaps
sit rep.
I did, yeah. All right. Well, I guess now we wait and see what actually happens.
Yeah, it didn't seem like Nasrallah was saying, he did seem to be saying that
Yeah.
this will take time.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna want to get through the August 3rd, whatever day of rage. There's all kinds of mourning and things that they want to do first.
Who's who's the army that's going to invade Lebanon? Is it the computer science people that are back at their jobs? Because those
Maybe
people all
that's when
have to
they
be
need.
called
Yeah,
up.
maybe it is Delta or whatever. Maybe it is the Marines or something. I don't know. Maybe this is they cobble together the aren't most of the isn't most of the army that's deployed right now on the northern border as it stands?
No.
No?
Well, no, well, they're all spread out, right? Because they have to be spread out. They have
Affiliates.
territorial defenses so that are set up permanently in the West Bank and in the North.
Yeah.
And so they they have those in position. That's part of the permanent. And they also have reserve units that rotate into those territorial defenses. But no, when Yoav Gallant said we're taking the tanks from Rafa to the Litani River, that's what has to happen. There's not an extra set of tanks somewhere. There's not extra sets of fighters somewhere that come out of nowhere So
Yeah.
what we
Then they're
saw
probably
with
just
Gaza, it takes weeks for them to bring enough troops to mass at the border.
so they're
By that
probably
time,
hoping for an air. It's probably air war. It's probably an air war fantasy.
yeah, and then tens of thousands of Hezbollah fighters come across the border and take the Galilee. And then people will leave Israel. If Hezbollah's fighting in the Galilee, that's just like mind bending to people. They're,
That's a
they talk, yeah.
well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a remarkable time. It's an unbelievable, it feels, it was only like 2 weeks ago that Trump got almost assassinated. And it was like, it feels like that's like a year ago
Ancient
in
history.
like
Ancient,
ancient history.
absolutely ancient history has, and yeah. Anybody seen Biden? I don't know. They recognized the loser of the Venezuelan election. They're doing Guaido again. They're doing Juan Guaido again. The
Is that
Americans
real?
said, yeah, the Americans said we're recognizing Gonzalez as president. So they're just gonna do that again. They're
Yeah.
gonna do that every time.
Haven't they? I don't know Venezuela's story like you do, but don't they say every election is rigged? Haven't they been saying this for
Yeah.
a generation and a half?
Whenever they lose, yeah. Like they this one they went in really hoping the opposition would win, and then when they lost, they said it was a fraud, which is what they did the last few times.
That's another sit rep for another night.
I don't think I don't think I'm gonna. All right, all right. So hang in there, everybody. We'll see what comes. It's gonna who knows? Who knows? The resistance is no doubt mapping it out as we speak. So
And the Israelis aren't. So, you can be sure of that.
see you on the next.
See you guys.